You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well-funded.
Healthcare Reform Week 2. How about a little look at a little-known provision of the overhaul, which you may not have heard about, a reform law that calls for the creation of a 6,000-person army. Joining us now with more on the Ready Reserve is senior Fox News judicial analyst, Judge Andrew Napolitano. Judge, before we get to it, you had some breaking news you just saw.
The state of Utah has just voted, and the governor has just signed into law legislation to condemn, that is, to use eminent domain on property owned by the federal government. This will be the first time in American history that a state has taken property from the federal government against its will by paying them for the property, as the feds have been doing for 230 years to the rest of us.
All right, Judge, let's just jump right into the segment now. The 6,000-person army, constitutional?
If the government needed more physicians, and I don't know why the government needs physicians, but if the government needed more physicians, they could hire them. They could work in the Public Health Service, which is in the Department of Health and Human Services, or the Center for Disease Controls, which is also in the Department of Health and Human Services. This legislation says that they will train with the military. And if the president wants them to, they will have the powers of the military. This also lets the president take National Guard away from governors when there is no wartime. Right now, there must be a war for the president to take the National Guard away from governors against the will of the governors. So it is very scary that the president would have this private army, that some of it would be funded by the states and some of it funded by the federal government. Why does he need an army? Governor, to help keep us healthy?
Judge, as you look at that, first of all, I mean, as I hear people talk about this stuff, I wonder if I need to go put on my tinfoil hat, because that's what I start wondering is, we've been hearing that we're starting FEMA camps for the last 5 years. That hasn't happened. Well, how serious do we need to take this?
If someone had said to me, why didn't you read the whole bill? Well, I read portions of it. I didn't see this in there when I read it. This is just 2 pages of 2,700 pages. We don't know how the bill was written, but we do know this. There is no one person in the Congress who read the entire bill on the Democratic side, or we would have known about this. Even the Republicans who read the bill did not raise this issue. Question, what else is in there that wasn't debated and that we don't know about and that is now the law of the land? Did the president know this was in there when he signed it into law?
Wait, and those are all great points, but these 6,000 people are being hired just to get the word out. They're not going to Afghanistan anytime soon. So they will have the powers.
They can't go to Afghanistan.
Right.
They can only stay in this country, which makes it even more fearful. Yeah. Because right now, the United States military may not be used by the president for any purpose in this country. But this group of 6,000 people, or however big it gets, can be used by the president for domestic purposes. Why do doctors need to have uniforms and guns?
Physicians brandishing guns to get the word out.
I don't know why we need that in America. I don't know why we need that anywhere.
The concern isn't that a physician has a gun. The concern is that there's a 6,000-person army or 60,000-person army that may be at the disposal of the president to use however way he... Is it defined how these people can be used?
No. In fact, the language is intentionally vague. And there's terminology in there with which we're unfamiliar, like reserve corps and regular reserve. These are phrases that are flexible. Regular reserve could refer to the National Guard. It could refer to something that we don't know what it means. But the concept of a domestic military, which the president once called for before he was the president of the United States. He said to help the government help the people. Hey, I'm from the government. I'm here to help you. The 9 most dangerous words in the English language, according to President Reagan.
Including when Reagan speaks, though.
Yes, including when anybody with this kind of power speaks. Who knows what they'll do with it? Why do they need a military like this?
Judge,
I'll tell you something else that's a little kinky. The Constitution prohibits funding the military for more than 2 years at a time. This thing is funded for 4 years.
So, and Judge, you just mentioned this that it gives certain powers in times of war and other powers in times of not war. Supposedly, we are at war right now with Afghanistan and Iraq, but we're not officially at war with Afghanistan and Iraq. Can you explain?
We have not declared war on any person, group, organization, or thing.
So we're not at war.
Or government. We are legally not at war. The Congress has given the president something called an authorization to use military force. The president can go after any person,
how does that tie into
or
this new
government that he
organization?
wants to go after. There's nobody to surrender. So this is basically an open-ended act saying the president can fight a war even though there's no lawful war being fought.
Hey, Judge, is it possible? Do we know who put this provision in?
No, we don't know who put the provision in. We know this. When the courts are trying to construe what legislation means, they frequently look to what members of Congress said about it when they voted for it. Justice Scalia says it doesn't matter what they say because they only vote for one reason, and that's to get reelected. But sometimes they do say on the floor of the Congress what it's meant by a particular clause in the legislation. You know how much debate there was on this clause? Zero. We don't know who put it in, and we don't know what's intended.
Way to find out. Who don't
how
have
are we
to
funding this?
$12 million and $5 million appropriated in the same legislation that creates the Army. The rest by the states from whom these soldiers are taken against the will of the governors.
Judge, this is scary stuff, Judge.
It is scary that the sort of fundamentals of our government would be altered by ordinary legislation. Guess what? The Congress doesn't let the Congress do this. This is another thing for the courts to look at and hopefully, please, invalidate.
must be a fingerprint, Judge. There has to be someone's fingerprint on this.
In fairness to your question, this thing just came to everybody's attention today. Somebody's going to come out of the woods and say, I put it in, and here's why it's there. But nobody can say, here's why I voted for it, because those characters didn't read it before they voted for it.
Judge, we love having you on.
You never want a serious crisis to go to waste. And what I mean by that, it's an opportunity to do things that you think you could not do before.
We cannot continue to rely only on our military in order to achieve the national security objectives that we've set. We've got to have a civilian national security force that's just as powerful, just as strong, just as well funded.
The idea of universal citizen service. You have to participate.
Well, you have to, in a sense, it's required of everybody. Citizenship is not an entitlement program. It comes with responsibilities.
I pledge
to be a servant to our president.
I pledge
To be a servant to our president. To be a servant to our president. To be a servant to our president.
Abolishing the race America! Yes, we can! Embrace burdens of our past, not the victims of our past! Yes, we can!
Because of Obama, I am inspired to be the next doctor. Obama's healthcare plan will include coverage of all essential medical services. Obama's
We're gonna spread happiness. We're gonna spread freedom. Obama's gonna change it. Obama's gonna lead 'em. We're gonna change it and rearrange it. We're gonna change the world. Yes, we can. 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 Yes, we can.
John T. Retreat!